So
Yeah.
where things get interesting though is when we look at PTSD is what this guy could have. So to give you an idea of PTSD, it is to describe the baseline idea. So your brain has a certain threshold of stress that it can deal with. And as long as your threshold is beneath that, as long as the stress you're undergoing is beneath that stress threshold, and you haven't had a bunch of stuff reduce that threshold. Um, Easiest way to think about it: you have a bucket. This is your stress bucket. Stuff that's just lingering stresses basically put sand in the bottom of the bucket, and stuff that it's put sand in the bottom of the bucket. And your daily stress is just water that is steadily evaporating. Like that's the easiest way to think about stress. Um, PTSD happens when it overflows, because when it overflows, you get something called trauma. So, depending on the level of trauma, if it's like low level trauma, it might have some deleterious effects to you. Like maybe you'll have like really low level anxiety, but you won't have flashbacks, that kind of thing. However, we don't we don't necessarily worry too much about like a little bit of overflow. You'll kind of have a little freak out. Um, well, that's as it gets to the top. When it overflows, you basically have some sort of mental breakdown. You have what we call a mental health crisis because now you're experiencing trauma. Uh, so PTSD is when that trauma, when that overflow is enough to where it like forces your brain to basically shortcut almost everything to identify things as like good and safe or bad and dangerous. And so people with PTSD, their brain sort of gets stuck in a circuit, stuck in a cycle where they have to look at the world as either safe and like knowable or dangerous and unsafe. So you'll see this a lot with veterans. So especially if they had combat jobs, veterans will always like to sit nearest to the door. Um, if you ever go and like get a meal with a veteran or sit in some sort of diner with a veteran, they will always want to sit with their backs against the wall so that no one can be behind them and they can see everything. If there's two veterans and they trust the other person, they they're willing to sit with their back to the basically the diner because they trust that the other person is watching. Right. So there's a lot of aspects of PTSD that are problematic, if you will, for the person who has the PTSD. Another way to look at this, like trauma and all that, is your brain. One way that what I've had one therapist put it uh, was he did something called he was bilateral stimulation therapy, basically. His idea was uh, your brain basically records memories sort of chronologically on, we'll say, the left side of your brain. It's where a lot of logic happens. And then it records the emotional part of the memory on the right side. Uh, if you like how you can look at this, is you have the timeline of the memory, and then there are emotional tags attached to that. And so when that emotional tag gets hit, your brain the left part of the brain tells the right part of the brain, hey, feel this emotion. And so the right part says, you got it, champ. And it just makes you feel the emotion. The and so this is how memories work. So you could say trauma is the timeline and everything kind of gets crammed into the emotional side. And so whenever you experience any part of that memory or whenever you get that like initial tag gets hit for that memory, it brings back the entire memory in like crystal clarity. and you relive that horrible experience over. So that's kind of what PTSD does. If you ever heard people talk about flashbacks, having night terrors, we saw a night terror as the very beginning of this visual novel. He's literally having a night terror. He's seeing the part where I'm assuming he gets horribly injured. I don't know if the other person gets horribly injured. It sounds like they went and they were doing their mountaineering, and then part of his equipment failed, which happens. Like, this is just a reality of mountain climbing. Um, you're going to have stuff that just fails on you, which is why it's good to have some sort of backup, that kind of thing. So something happened. He fell. Probably, it sounds like he has brain damage. So he has a traumatic brain injury, is what it sounds like. So he probably hit his head on something on the way down, which helped to slow him down to where he didn't just die when he hit the ground. Maybe he fell into a ravine or a crevasse. Who knows?
But it only seems to affect his leg, one of his legs. So
Well,
it could be like it got damaged and it got choked off, or there's some kind of injury
no,
to
his
that
leg
leg.
is still there.
I know
His leg
it's
is.
there, but it could have had like a reduction in like blood flow to the point where it damaged some of the nerves. That's kind of one thing. It
Um,
sounds more like nerve damage just that one leg, because that seems to be the only thing.
well, brain damage is nerve damage.
Yeah,
But
but
I know
it
what you're
would be
talking
to
about.
the,
Like, you're talking like the skeletal muscular system beyond the brain, the peripheral nervous
yeah,
system.
yeah, just for that leg. Like maybe the leg got like jammed in something, not enough to have to remove it, but it's been damaged with like nerve damage. Because I just it doesn't sound like the rest of his body is being affected by any kind of nerve damage. It's just that one
I mean,
leg.
it's entirely possible, and then it intermittently works, which I don't know enough about like peripheral nervous system damage aside from like spinal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, usually if spinal stuff gets like really severed, then you just become unable to use your legs.
Yeah.
But legs plural, not singular. So from what you're thinking, it could have been some sort of break that happened after it splits off from the spine into each leg.
Yeah,
And so
something in
that could
there.
have gotten severed. The problem there is that usually it's total. So like, you either can use your leg or you can't use your leg at all, period. But again, I don't know enough. There's probably exceptions to that. The
Mm-hmm.
the partialness of it is what makes me think it might be brain damage. And plus, he seems young enough. He seems like a teenager, or maybe just a young adult, or like a new adult. So he's still young enough to where his brain could fill in the gaps, but not be able to do it as. But maybe it hasn't gotten there yet. Um, for reference, for those of you who don't know, let's say you take like a 6 year old and they go mountain climbing with their dad for some reason, and they fall and they hit their head and it does a bunch of brain damage. Their brain could actually appropriate parts of the other brain to fill in those roles. The younger the brain damage happens, the more easy it is, the more easily the brain can sort of fill that in. And so they can regain some function or do some other things. But as you get older, that very quickly starts going away. Uh, like, if a 40-year old takes some pretty serious brain damage, it's I don't know if I would say it's permanent, but it might take them much longer to regain function. But that's why I think it might be some sort of TBI, traumatic brain injury. But with PTSD, they will have those flashbacks. Um, Plus, with mountaineering, you're going to fall a lot, and when you start falling, it's really hard to start protecting the brain from just the forces that are at play, because like every part of you starts accelerating at like 2 meters a second or something. Like every part of you, or however fast it is. I think I checked it once. It was like, if you were to fall, he was like 30 feet or something. You're moving at like 22 miles an hour. something like that, 30-ish kilometers an hour. So, but anyway, the PTSD. It has night terrors, it has panic attacks, it has all this stuff because, again, whenever anything that's even tangential triggers that memory or starts getting anywhere near it, it starts triggering those emotional reactions. And so he's already had panic attacks. And so whenever somebody starts talking about therapists, well, the thing that is both amazing and horrible about therapists is that one, they do genuinely want to help you. That's what the amazing part is. And after enough therapy, they can probably help you, give you the skills that you need to help yourself work beyond whatever the PTSD is. The problem is that they are inherently tied to the PTSD. So, which is why you have to like really build up trust with the therapist to even let them in. Like, no one goes to a therapist and on day one is instantly fine, right? Instantly letting them in. It takes a while to build the rapport. So it's scary as hell too. A lot of people, like, it's not a fun experience to go to a therapist the first time, but the more people go, the more they realize it's useful to them and good for them. So yeah, PTSD. Uh, that's where the panic attacks are from, the anxiety, all this stuff. And the brain damage, the traumatic brain injury, potentially, that's causing the leg to be kind of funny. It's isolated to just that leg, but it works sometimes. Makes you think it might be a TBI. Um, yeah. Just think PTSD. They're doing a threat analysis, but everything's already categorized as dangerous. I guess is the easy way to think about it. So then if something seems worrisome or potentially dangerous, it gets pushed up like to extremely dangerous and the body starts